everyone. So here we are back with another session which will be helpful for your examination. The topic for today's session is life processes. So we have already discussed the PYQs which came from this chapter. Hence, I need not tell you the importance or the weightage of this chapter in your examination. So why are we here? We are here to discuss this chapter, give you some tips using the questions. As we have already told you that revising with the questions is always a good approach because you will be actively present while you are applying your brain itself, right? So, let us begin with the discussion of this chapter, that is life processes. Here we have the very first question, which is saying you to identify the parasitic organism, and the organisms provided to us are lichen, leech, dog and algae. So, in these we need to find out which organism is following parasitism. Okay. Now, parasitism is a mode of nutrition. That means it is a mode of acquiring nutrition for that organism. So, here students, what do you understand by a parasite? To give you a simple example, just consider the lice that are present in human hair or in dogs as well. So, when they are present on their host organism, they are deriving their nutrition from their host. The important part is that in this process, they are harming their host. Their host is not enjoying their company. Instead, they are suffering because of them. When we have lice in our hair, we will be doing continuous scratching and all. Okay, we are not comfortable with those being in our hairs. Okay, so parasitism is a relationship in which the parasite will gain nutrition from their host and in the process it will harm them. Okay. Now over here, this organism, that is leech. If I take this leech organism and I will keep it on my hand, then it will suck blood from my body. Okay. So obviously I am being harmed, but that sucked blood is the source of nutrition for that leech. Hence we are saying that leech is a parasite. Now, what about others? We have lichen, dog and algae. These are not having parasitic mode of nutrition. What they are having, we will also be discussing, but for sure they are not parasites. First of all, let us see. So, let us have the definition of parasitism. Parasitism is the mode of nutrition in which organisms derive nutrition from their host and in the process they will harm them. Over here, friends, this derived nutrition from their host is comprising of the important section in your answer. You need to have these words to gain marks from this question. Okay. So, as we discussed, leech is the answer. This organism has scientific name which is Hirudinaria. This is a genus name, hence you need to italicize it when we are printing it. But when you will write it on your paper, you need to underline the name, okay? Because we always have this rule to underline the species and genus name, right? So, leech is a parasitic organism that feeds on the blood of its host, and the host are vertebrates. What are vertebrates? You will be knowing about vertebrates from the chapter of animal classification, right? Now, let us see what is the mode of nutrition for the rest of the organism. First of all, we have lichen. Lichen is a symbiotic relationship between algae and fungi. Here, symbiosis refers to a relationship between organisms in which both of them are benefited. So, in this relationship of algae and fungi, which is called as lichen, both of them are benefited. Next is dog. So, dog is having holozoic nutrition mode. This means when you will feed the dog, you will be giving them food, right? They will be eating it, then they will be digesting it, and then finally they will obtain the nutrients from that food. This is the same thing that we humans do as well. So, humans, dogs, cats all have holozoic mode of nutrition. Okay. Next one is algae. Algae are autotrophic organisms. That means they can produce their own food. We humans can't do it. Hence, we are heterotrophs as well. Okay. So, over here we have understood that there are different modes of nutrition well suited for different types of organisms. You need to understand and remember some examples which are given in your textbook so that you can attempt these type of questions. Similar question came in your previous year paper in which you were given with the mode of nutrition along with the name of the organism, and you had to find out which one is the correct pair. So, if you remember the organisms and which mode of nutrition they are following, it will be very much easier for you to attempt your upcoming examination. Now friends, let us move on to the next question that we have prepared for you. So here the question is, which enzyme is released in the stomach? Now it is understood that you need to answer this question with respect to the chapter of life process, and in that the digestive system of human beings part. Okay. So which enzyme is released in stomach? For this, you should also know what do we mean by enzymes. Enzymes, to simply put them, they are the biological catalyst. Okay, mostly enzymes are proteinaceous, but sometimes we have different characters as well. Right, we have ribozymes in which the RNA is acting as enzyme. Okay, so over here, the enzyme that is released in stomach, specifically it is released in stomach, that is pepsin. Okay. So, pepsin is the stomach enzyme which is released into the stomach as we have already talked, and this is released in inactive form, and this inactive form is known as pepsinogen. Friends, this inactive forms is also referred to as zymogens. Okay. So, if you get this word in your exam, don't get confused. It just means that it is the inactive form of the active protein. Okay. And a little tip, the inactive forms generally have their names ending with OGEN. Okay. So, trypsinogen, chymotrypsinogen or pepsinogen, these are all the inactive forms, not the active ones. Active form is called as pepsin, without that nogen. Okay. So, this enzyme pepsin is released in the stomach by the gastric chief cells. You need to also remember the source. That also might come in your exams, right? So, when you are practicing a question, try to follow all the related topics that you can attach to it. Okay? So, it will create a mental picture in your head and it will help you to attempt your paper in a better way. Okay? Now, let us also understand what is the action or what is the role of this enzyme. Pepsin is acting in protein digestion. That means, if I have this big protein in my system and it needs to be digested, then pepsin will be working on it, okay, and it will be creating smaller peptides, okay, it will be digesting my protein molecule which is a big one, and now I have created or produced smaller peptides, okay, we term it as polypeptides or peptides as well. Now one more thing is that this pepsinogen is converted to pepsin by the presence of HCl, that is hydrochloric acid, which is present in the stomach. Okay. So, you get an idea of what we are doing right here, right? We are using the question and we are trying to sum up majority of the things that might relate with this question. Okay. Now friends, let us move on to the next question that we have for you. Here, this question is MCQ, that means multiple choice questions. This also comprises in your paper because section A is coming in MCQ forms only. Okay. So this question, let us read the question. It says the component of the blood involved in the body's defense actions is. So basically, the question is trying to ask you about your immunity. What is immunity? Yes. Immunity is the body's defense or the capability of an organism to fight off the pathogens that are trying to infect it. Okay. So let us see over here, the options are fibrin, white blood cells, red blood cells and platelets. So friends, try to remember where have you learned or read this word, that is platelet. Okay. Whenever we have an injury or wound on our body, then the blood starts to ooze out from that surface or from that area. Now, what if the blood kept losing? Okay, there is no system in our body to control that blood loss. Then eventually, all the blood in our body is prone to exit, right? And that will be a very fatal condition. But thanks to this platelets, fibrin, fibrinogen, everything, we have a coagulation process going on which will create a coagulate and it will plug the wound site so that the blood is not lost uncontrollably. Okay. So, obviously from our discussion we understood that fibrin and platelets are involved in blood coagulation, not in defense system. Okay. Now let's go back to this red blood cells. Red blood cells have an important protein which is hemoglobin. Please remember details about this respiratory pigment because they have asked many questions on this topic. Okay. So this hemoglobin which is present in RBCs is responsible for oxygen transport. Okay friends. So obviously if we go from the elimination point of view, then we have eliminated the three options and we are left with white blood cells, which should be the correct answer for this question. This is another approach in which you can deal with your questions in MCQs. Let us see the solution part. So here white blood cells are involved in defense actions comprising of many immune system cells. Okay, for example, we have lymphocytes in which your B lymphocytes, T lymphocytes are coming. Then we have neutrophils, macrophages and so on and so forth. So all these cells are coming under white blood cells which are having the function of body's defense mechanism. Okay. Then over here as we just discussed, fibrin and platelets are involved in blood coagulation process and RBCs are associated with oxygen transport because hemoglobin is responsible for oxygen transport in our body. Since we are taking in air, we are taking in that oxygen and that oxygen needs to be reaching all over the tissues in our body. That job is of hemoglobin present in RBC. So friends, now we are done with this question. Let us proceed with the next one. The next question over here, this question is telling us to name the structural and functional unit of kidney. Such a simple question. From this excretory system topic of your chapter life processes, many questions have came, in which you are supposed to draw the diagram for nephron or you need to explain how are urine produced. So obviously excretory system is a very important topic which you need not skip for your upcoming examination. Now to give you a generalized view of what is your excretory system doing, we will take an analogy in which you might consider the fridge or the refrigerator which is present in your home. Okay. Now say for example you have 10 food items which are kept in your refrigerator and 5 have gone bad. Okay. Now what will you do? You will just go and pick up those 5 items and you will place them in the trash can, right? But in our body, the excretory system doesn't work like that. What our excretory system will do is that it will take out all the 10 items, then it will reabsorb or it will replace the 5 good items again in the refrigerator and then those 5 bad items which will go into the trash can. Okay. So, now taking it into our body, what our excretory system do is, it will filter all the blood which is present in our body, then it will reabsorb the useful components of the blood and then it will excrete the waste products which are formed in our body due to the process of metabolism. Okay. So that was a general overview of what our excretory system actually does. Over here, we are supposed to name the structural and functional unit of the kidney. Kidney's structural and functional unit is the nephron. Okay, and here is the structure for the nephron in which you can understand that this is the renal artery and this is the renal vein. Arteries take the blood away from the heart. Okay, arteries and away you can relate. So, this renal artery is taking the blood from our heart that has been transported through our body and it is giving it to the kidney. And in kidney, nephron is the structural and functional unit, hence this blood is entering the nephrons. Now over here, the filtration process will occur, the reabsorption will occur and then finally the excretion will be taking place. Here is renal vein from which the useful volume of blood is sent again to the body. Okay, and renal vein, that means kidney's vein. Veins pump blood towards the heart. Okay, so it will take the blood from the kidney and it will bring it to the heart. Okay, over here we have glomerulus, here we have Bowman's capsule. All those things, the parts of the nephrons, what are the events going on in these different parts, need to be understood by you properly. Okay. So here the answer is simple. Nephrons are the structural and functional units of kidneys. Here the question is to name the tissues responsible for food and water transport in higher plants. Now there are many questions which come from this topic of transportation in animals as well as in plants. In plants, when we are talking about transportation, we talk about xylem, okay, and then we talk about phloem. Now remember friends that these two tissues are present in higher plants, not in lower plants, because lower plants are very simple in their organization and they don't have this much specialized tissues present in them. Okay, so for transportation in higher plants, we always talk about xylem and phloem. And for transportation in human beings or in animals, we talk about the circulatory system, okay, in which heart will be pumping blood and that blood is traveling across the body of that organism. Okay. So friends, here we are supposed to answer the tissues that are responsible for food and water transport. Food is transported by phloem and water is transported by xylem. You need to understand and remember these two words and these two relations very thoroughly, okay, because this is very simple and you need not confuse this type of things in your exams. So the answer is food and water are transported through phloem and xylem respectively. Now why we have introduced this question is because there is a trick in this question. What happens is we are used to say these terms like xylem and phloem. So when you will see this question, these kind of questions, you will get a notion that it is very simple, so we can attempt it very easily. But what will happen is you might write that food and water are transported through xylem and phloem respectively. And just then your answer will become incorrect because you have used the incorrect sequence of the terms. Okay, so I'll recommend you to please read the words very properly. Food transport is done by phloem and water transport is done by xylem. Okay. Now over in this diagram we will see that xylem is having one-way flow. That means xylem will be transporting the water from the roots and it will take it to the other parts of the plants. But in phloem, what is happening is food is being prepared in the leaves, okay, or in the green parts of the plants. And the green parts can be anywhere in the plant, right? It can be on the top, it can be in the bottom, leaf can be anywhere. So, phloem is always having two-way flow of the food and nutrients, but xylem is having one-way flow of water and nutrients. Okay, you need to understand what is the difference between xylem and phloem as well. So, this image is giving you somewhat idea of that part. Like over here you can see xylem tissue is continuous. It is like a pipe. Okay, water is coming from downwards and it is going to upward direction. But over here phloem is not a continuous pipe. You have obstacles over here which are the walls with perforations. Perforations are the holes through which this food will be traveling. Okay, but it is not a continuous tissue. On the other hand, xylem is a continuous one. So friends, just get an idea of how you need to relate the topics with one question. Okay. Here is the question that we are having. It says, which element is essential for the formation of proteins? Over here, the direct question I can ask is, what are proteins? And you need to answer that they are polymers of amino acids. Okay. And they are having structural role, functional role in our body. Okay. So, if I point to you, what is this? You will say protein because hair is protein. Our nails are also protein. So, you need to remember what are the examples of protein as well. Herein, you are asked which element is essential for the formation of proteins. So, over here, let us first see the general representation of an amino acid. What are the groups that are being present? First, this is the carbon atom and then you will have carboxylic acid and then you will have the ammonium group. Okay. Now, rest of the thing over here we have the R group which will be changing for different amino acids that we will not consider over here. and one is the hydrogen atom. So over here, the utmost importance is of this amino group, because nitrogen deficiency will lead to protein deficiency in your body directly. Okay. Hence, we are supposed to have proteinaceous diet in which we will have sources of food which have high protein in them. Okay. So, basically the answer is the nitrogen element is essential for the formation of proteins. This one is carbon, oxygen, hydrogen. These are very much abundant in our body. Okay. So, let us see the answer over here. The solution says that nitrogen is the essential element requirement for the protein formation, as it is the major constituent of amino acids that form the proteins. Now, the idea of telling you the structure of amino acid was to create a mental picture that you might just remember that there was something NH2 or NH3 that was in the video session, so you can relate it with the nitrogen. Okay. Now, here is the question. The question says, the digestion of food starts in dash. So, again, MCQ question. Now, friends, we are talking about the digestive system in humans. What we will say? That yes, we will eat the food, it will enter the mouth, then it will go to the esophagus, then it will reach stomach wherein the food is churned, and then we have small intestine. In this process, there are different glands which are also releasing the juices so that the digestion is aided. Okay. Then in small intestine, assimilation will occur. That means the food is being absorbed. Not food, but the nutrients that are derived from that food are being absorbed. And then the waste material will go into the large intestine, from where some water and other things are reabsorbed, and finally the waste product is thrown out from the anus. Okay, so this is the whole picture of human digestive system. Now in this, what is the part in which the digestion of food actually starts? Is it the esophagus? Is it the pharynx or the mouth cavity or the stomach? Now, there are many people who will answer that the digestion starts in stomach. Okay, but that is not true. So, we have the digestion of food starting in mouth cavity itself. Why? We will just see. Okay, the solution part will say that digestion of food starts in the mouth cavity itself. Now friends, tell me if you have heard about something which is called as salivary amylase. Okay. This salivary amylase, salivary because this amylase is present in the human saliva, which is present in the mouth cavity. Hence, the digestion starts in mouth cavity itself. So, this amylase is acting upon starch. Do you know starch? Starch is the reserve food material for plants, and we are having many plant-based things in our diet, right? So, this digestion of starch starts in our mouth cavity, and it will lead to the formation of some degradation products which are, say for example, amylose. Okay. Other things are also produced, but we will be concerning about this much topic only. Now, this word will also give you an idea of why the enzyme name is amylase. Basically, it is relating to amylose. Okay, we have just A over here. Okay, so you can relate it to just keep the answer in your memory. So, coming back to the question, yes, the digestion of the food starts in the mouth cavity and not in the stomach or pharynx or esophagus. Okay. Here is the next question. It says, how is the inner lining of the stomach protected from the action of acid? Just now we have talked about our stomach and how the enzyme pepsin is released in it and it acts over the protein digestion process. Now, along with that thing, we have also seen that pepsinogen, which was a zymogen, okay, was activated due to the acid present in the stomach in the pepsin form. Okay. Now, we are asked about how is the inner lining of the stomach protected from the action of acid. Since the acid is HCl, hydrochloric acid, and it is very strong, okay, 2 to 3 is the range of the pH of that acid in our body. 2 to 3 is the range of the pH of that acid in our stomach. So, how come the stomach walls and other things are not getting harmed from that concentrated acid? Okay, that is the question that is being asked. So, over here friends, the answer is very simple. There is a coating to the inner side of the stomach wall which is preventing the direct contact of the acid with the stomach. Okay, and that's why it is protected from that concentrated acid. So, the mucus protects the inner lining of the stomach from the action of acid under normal conditions. So, if I say this is the stomach part and here it is secreting the acid molecules. Okay, then there are cells which will be creating a layer on this stomach. Okay, to the inner walls of the stomach, and hence the acid will not be having direct contact to the wall of the stomach, and hence the stomach is being saved from the corroding or from the harmful activities of the acid. Okay. Here is the next question. The next question says, explain the significance of villi in the small intestine. Understand this, friends, that we are using small questions and we are actually explaining you the topic of human digestive system. Okay. So, over here the question is coming from small intestine part of your digestive system, and it says, what is the significance of villi? Now, first of all, let us visualize this villi over here. Okay, we have a beautiful image which is showing you the wall of the stomach. Okay, and in this wall, if you will magnify this small part, you will be seeing there are many villi present. Okay, and these are simply finger-like projections, right? What is the significance of this villi in your small intestine only? Why is this not present in stomach, or why is it not present in esophagus? Because as we just mentioned that assimilation or absorption of nutrients from the digested food material occurs in your small intestine. So, absorption part is occurring in small intestine, and this villi which is present is basically increasing the surface area. Now, say for example, my fingers are closed like this. Okay, so the surface area which is exposed to my fingers is only this much. Okay, and if I just open them, now the surface area is increased, right? Now the surface is very much more exposed to the nutrient absorption. Hence, this villi is helping in increasing the surface area for absorption of nutrients. And obviously here we have villus, which is the singular form of the term villi. Here these are villi, or we can also refer to them as microvilli because they are very small or minute in size. Okay. So let us see the solution part. It says the nutrients obtained from the digestive food are absorbed by the villi in the small intestine. Digested. Villi increases the surface area of absorption as we just saw, and finally the villi are richly supplied with blood vessels, okay, that take the absorbed food to each and every cell of the body where it is utilized for obtaining energy, building up new tissues and the repair of old tissues. So basically they have gained the nutrients. As you can see, these red colored tubules are artery and these blue colored tubules are vein. Artery will be taking the blood away from the heart towards the small intestine. Veins are taking the blood to the heart away from small intestine. Okay. So in this way, blood is being circulated and the nutrients will be entering from the small intestine to this blood. Okay. And hence assimilation will take place. So here, friends, we have understood the significance of villi in our small intestine. To our earlier question, why these villi are not present in our stomach or esophagus? Simply because absorption does not take place over there. They have different functions. Esophagus is connecting, it is transporting the food. Stomach is churning the food. Okay. So, as per the functions, there are different structures present in different organs to facilitate that function. The question here is, give reason. We are given with two sentences. First one is, ventricles have thicker muscular walls, and second one is, valves are present in the human heart. So, before going into the detail of this question, let us first see if these statements are understood by this diagram. So, if you will see, this is the right ventricle, here we have the left ventricle, and over here we have left atrium and right atrium. This is the diagram of a human heart. You can relate it, right, since you have already learned the chapter. So, over here if you will see, this ventricle is having a very thick wall. Okay, this wall is very thick, but in this atrium the wall is becoming thin, right? It is not as much thick as the ventricles. So this is our question. Ventricles have thicker muscular walls and we need to give reason why is it so. Next thing is valves are present. If you will see over here, we are having valves. Okay, pulmonary valve, tricuspid valve, mitral valve, aortic valve. So different valves are present in our heart. Now I need you to visualize the valves that are present in your washrooms and toilets. Okay. So when water is being released to your home, you will be switching on that valve, right? If this is the pipe and here is the valve, what you will be doing? You will be removing this valve. Okay, this will come over here so that water can go. And when the water supply is stopped, then you will again close this valve. Okay, so that now the water could not rush back from your tanks and all of those things, right? So that is the function of valve. It will prevent the backward flow of water, right? Same thing is happening in our heart as well, but here instead of water we have blood. As we know, heart is the pumping organ, so the blood is coming in, it is being released from over here, and each and every time the process should be efficient, and hence we need the valves. Now friends, let us see the answer to our question. First of all, ventricles have to pump blood into various organs. Okay, blood comes from atrium to the ventricle, and ventricle will pump the blood to the rest of the body. So it will be having more pressure. It will hence require the thick walls. Okay, so ventricles have to pump blood into various organs. Hence they have thicker muscular walls than the atria. Atria just have to pour the blood into the ventricle, but ventricle has to pour the blood into the rest of the body. So it has a major job role, and henceforth it is having more strength in it. Okay. The next thing is about the valves. Valves in the human heart ensure that the blood does not flow backward. Okay, important terms which should be there in your answer paper if such question comes up. So, valves in the human heart ensure that the blood does not flow backward when the atria or ventricles contract. So, basically when we have atrium contracting, the blood will be going there. So, the valve should be open. And when the ventricles are contracting, then the blood should go to the body, not back into the atrium, and hence the valve needs to be closed. Okay. Here is the question that we are having. The question says to name the energy reserve carbohydrate in plants and animals. Just now we have studied about starch, right? We studied how amylase is working and starch is being degraded into its simpler forms. Over here, you are supposed to answer the energy reserve molecule in plants as well as in animals. First answer is simple, it is starch, and the second one is the glycogen. Now friends, when you are at this question, I need you to understand how is starch different than glycogen and how is it similar to glycogen as well. Basically, both of these things, starch and glycogen, are composed of glucose. You remember glucose? Whenever we are doing the respiration, glucose is required. Okay, we are eating all kinds of food, and basically glucose is the monomer which are present in it. We will degrade the major or complex food material and we will bring it down to glucose. Okay, this is true for carbohydrates. Now this glucose molecule is the constituent of starch as well as of glycogen. But starch is a more linear form of this glucose monomer, and glycogen is a complex form of this monomer of glucose. So if I say this one is starch, okay, so this circle is representing the glucose molecule, and this is one big chain going on. It will go on as well, but I am giving you just an example. And say for example, branching is happening over here and then it is happening over here. Okay, so this is kind of molecule of starch. But if I talk about the glycogen molecule, this branching will occur more frequently. Okay, it will be happening more repetitively. So it will become a very complex molecule then. And that is the difference between starch and glycogen. So you understood that they are similar yet they are different in ways. Okay. And from the topic as well, you will understand that starch is being reserved in plants and we animals store the glucose in the glycogen form. Now, why do we need to store this glucose if we are already using it for our respiration and for other purposes? So, basically friends, when we eat a meal, say for example, you had your lunch, then you have obtained a very great amount of energy from that one meal itself. And Say for example, you are not going to run after that lunch or after that dinner. You are just going to lay down and sleep and chill. Then the energy that is being created, what will our body do with it? Okay. Hence, it will save the energy in the form of glycogen and it will use it when you are running or walking or playing. Okay. So, that is all about this concept of the energy reserve molecules in plants as well as in animals. Here is the next question. The next question says, name the respiratory pigment in the human body and state its location. So, we just talked about hemoglobin RBCs in one of the questions. In there, we discussed that hemoglobin is responsible for the oxygen transport. Here, the term is respiratory pigment. Respiratory pigment means a molecule which is being used in the respiration. Okay. And you just need to name it. So, the answer becomes very clear and very easy that the pigment is hemoglobin. Why are we calling it as pigment? Because it is red in color. Pigments are generally supposed to have some colors. Okay. So, when you see a brinjal or a very bright colored flower, it is all because of pigments. Okay. And then we need to state its location. Seems like we have already answered this question in our session. Okay. But still, let us have it over here. The answer is, in human beings, the respiratory pigment is hemoglobin, which has a very high affinity for oxygen. So, if there is a molecule of hemoglobin, say for example, this is the molecule of hemoglobin, this will have a very high affinity for oxygen. That's why when we are breathing in the air, this hemoglobin will immediately bind to the oxygen molecules that we are giving to it. Okay, and it will bind and then it will go to the rest of the body in different tissues and there it will release it, and here the protein's conformation changes. Hence, at one location it is binding the oxygen and at other location it is releasing the oxygen. Okay. Next is, what is the location of this hemoglobin? Hemoglobin is present in the red blood corpuscles or the red blood cells, to put it simply, or you can also write it as RBCs. But if the question is giving you the marks for the location itself, you need to write the full forms. Okay. Refrain from writing RBCs or WBCs in such scenes. Okay. Or I'll give you a tip in the answer. If it is a long answer question, then you need to mention red blood corpuscles at least somewhere in your answer and then put it in a bracket as RBCs and then you can use RBCs, okay, to save time. The question here is to distinguish between aerobic and anaerobic respiration. Now, friends, respiration, excretory system, digestive system comprises of the major topics of this chapter. We have covered small intestine wherein we talked about villi, right? There have been questions on how the length of the small intestine is different in different kinds of organisms like in herbivores or in carnivores. Similarly, there have been questions on this aerobic and anaerobic respiration. You have been asked about just to show the diagram of anaerobic respiration, how we can have different products in this mode of respiration. So, the point I am telling you is that it is very important to go through the PYQs and it is very important to practice your chapter using the questions which we are doing right now. Okay. So, let us see over here what are the distinguishing points between aerobic and anaerobic respiration. So, here in this column we will have aerobic respiration and in this column we are having anaerobic respiration. It goes by default that whenever you are attempting distinguished type of questions, first point or the points which you are entering should be distinguished, should be different from the another point. They should be in contrast. Then only it makes sense to add the point. Okay. Then only you will gain marks from that point. If you are writing one thing and another thing you are discussing in its nearby cell, then it doesn't make sense and you may lose the marks. Okay. So, first point over here is respiration takes place in the presence of oxygen. Very important point. Aerobic respiration means that there is oxygen present in the environment and the organisms are needing that oxygen for their survival. Okay. Like say for example, we human beings, we cannot just survive without oxygen. If we are going into the deep sea or in the space, We need to carry the oxygen cylinder with us because that is very much important. We cannot survive without that oxygen. Hence, human beings, dogs, cats, fishes, all these organisms are aerobic organisms. Okay. Now you will see. First point we have written about presence of oxygen. Next point will be in contrast with this point. We will be saying that respiration takes place in the absence of oxygen. Okay. Here we have presence and here we have absence. So there are many organisms, many microorganisms to be particular, who are not requiring oxygen for their survival. Okay. Even so, if they come into the contact of oxygen, that is fatal to them. Okay. And this is basically possible because their metabolism is different from ours. Okay. So, respiration takes place in the absence of oxygen in anaerobic respiration. Okay. Next point is, aerobic respiration occurs in cytoplasm and mitochondria. Now, going back to the cell structure, we have different organelles. Cytoplasm is the matrix of the cell, okay, the fluid content that we see. And mitochondria, as you all know, is the powerhouse of the cell. Basically, in mitochondria, the respiration pathways is going on. And herein, the major pathway happens, that is Krebs cycle, and then we have electron transport chain, which is happening, which are dependent upon oxygen for different molecules that are required. Okay. So, aerobic respiration is happening in cytoplasm as well as in mitochondria. But anaerobic respiration is happening only in cytoplasm because we just said that simpler organisms undergo this type of respiration, microorganisms. They don't have well-developed system, they don't have organelles present in them. So, simpler organisms are having simple structures, right? They just have the membrane, they will have the cytoplasm and minimal amount of structures present in their cell. So, anaerobic respiration occurs in cytoplasm and it doesn't require any kind of organelles per se. Again, you will see that these 2 points are in contrast with each other. Hence, this answer will get the marks by the examiner. Hence, this answer will get the marks in the exam. Next point is of the breaking down. What happens in respiration? Here we have glucose, which is broken down into carbon dioxide and water. Okay. That is the ultimate result of respiration activity which is happening in aerobic organisms like the human beings as well. So, say for example, we are breathing in, we are obtaining the oxygen rich air into our body, and then the food that we have eaten, that is having starch or some other things, is broken down into glucose. Okay. And that glucose will undergo different pathways. First of all, glucose will be undergoing the glycolysis, which means glycoglucose lysis, that means breaking down of glucose. This glucose is being broken down to pyruvate molecule, which is a 3-carbon compound, and that pyruvate molecule will enter Krebs cycle, but there is a conversion reaction in which pyruvate is converted to acetyl coenzyme A, okay, which enters the Krebs cycle. And then we are producing NADH, FADH, which will be entering ETS, that is electron transport system, and from there we will be gaining energy, okay, in the form of ATP only. So, all of these things will lead to the production of carbon dioxide and water from that glucose molecule. So, this is the ultimate thing which is happening in aerobic respiration. Glucose will be converted into CO2 and H2O. But in anaerobic respiration, what we are having is glucose may be broken down into carbon dioxide, we can have lactic acid, we can have alcohol. This depends on the pathways that is being taken by the cell. Okay. And from this part only you had questions in your previous papers. You were supposed to show how can be glucose broken down into different products in anaerobic respiration. So basically you were supposed to write glucose over here, then some arrows will come. And then you will say that, okay, in simpler organisms, in anaerobes, it will be converted into CO2, alcohol, etc. Then in our muscle cells, do you know that in our muscle cells, we have anaerobic respiration going on. When we are very much fatigued, we have exercised a lot, then we are requiring a rapid amount of energy, okay, and we require it in instant. Hence, our muscle cells switches to Anaerobic respiration, it will only undergo glycolysis and then it will undergo 2 to 3 steps of fermentation in which the lactic acid and energy is being produced. That lactic acid is accumulated and hence when you have jogged for considerable amount of time or you have run, then you will be having pain in your muscles, okay, because of the accumulation of lactic acid. So basically the point is that glucose can be converted into many different products in anaerobic respiration, while in aerobic respiration it will be converted into energy, carbon dioxide and water only. Okay. Now let's have the last point. The last point is simply the extrapolation of the point that we just discussed. It says that more amount of energy is produced in aerobic respiration and comparatively less amount of energy is produced in anaerobic respiration. Okay. This is because over here only glycolysis occurs and then 1 or 2 steps will occur, and that's why 2 ATPs is the maximum amount of energy that is produced in anaerobic respiration. But in aerobic respiration, we can go to as much as 36 to 38 molecules of ATP per glucose molecule. Okay. So friends, this is the way in which you will be writing a distinguishing answer in which 2 points which are coming next to each other will be and should be in contrast with each other. Okay. So this is all about the aerobic and anaerobic respiration. The question here is, explain the transport of water in higher plants. Now, this question has come in different ways in your previous year papers. Hence, you should not opt out on the transport of water in higher plants. In a previous question, we have just said that water is being transported by xylem tissue and food is being transported by the phloem tissue. Okay. Over here, we will discuss how is this water transported to different parts of the plants. Okay, so let us begin. Over here, these are the components that are present in xylem. Okay, vessels and tracheids. You should remember at least these 2 words. Vessel, this is a very common term, and tracheids you need to put some effort to remember. Now, these are present in roots, stems, leaves, and these are interconnected. If you remember the diagram that we have just saw for xylem, it was a continuous tube, right? We had an analogy for it with a pipe, okay? There were no obstacles present, which were present in phloem, okay? Hence, we are saying that the vessels and tracheids of the roots, stems and leaves are interconnected, okay? To form a continuous system of water conducting channels reaching all parts of the plant. So, basically, just remember the pipe and you need to relate all these words, interconnected, continuous system of water conducting channels, okay, and then you are good to go with this big major fancy point, okay. The next thing is, the cells of the root in the contact with the soil will actively take up the ions, creating a concentration gradient between the root and the soil. Let us understand this point using a diagram. So basically, say for example, this is a plant and this is the surface of the soil that is beneath it, and over here the roots are present. Now we will magnify the last cell or the cells near the soil surface, okay, of that root. Now what will happen is this plant will purposely send many solutes in these cells, okay. Many solutes are not now present in that cell. But in the surrounding environment, the concentration of solutes is less, okay. That means water is present in higher concentration in the surrounding, and because of the active pumping of the ions or solutes in the cells, water here is now less, okay. I will write it over here since we don't have space in that cell, okay. So now water is being deficient inside the cell, but it is abundant in the surrounding. What will happen? Yes, along the concentration gradient, this water will simply enter the root cells, and that was the ultimate aim of the plant, okay. So it has pumped the ions into the cell, and thus water is traveling inside the plant body in the root cells, okay. So now the water that has entered is belonging to the plant and it can use it for different purposes. Now xylem can come and it can transport the water from one point to another. Next thing is, Water thus enters into the root, leading to steady movement of water into the root xylem. Okay. So, this all we have just understood using that simple diagram. Now, this is one mechanism of acquiring the water. This mechanism, which is dependent on the concentration gradient, is not able to transport the water over large distances. Now, if you will see, trees are very large, right, and root cells are very underneath the soil. So, how come the water which is gained from the soil, from the roots, is reaching up to that height, to the top of the plant? For that, we have different mechanism, which is transpiration. Okay, you might have heard about this. So, we'll just mention it over here. Transpiration is responsible for the movement of water over larger distances. Okay. Now, a word comes in the picture, which is stomata. What are stomata? Stomata are pores. We can say it simply. Okay. A specialized pore, but yeah, it is a pore. So, stomata are pores through which gas exchange occurs and water could also be given out to the surrounding air. We will understand this over here. So, say for example, again we have a plant coming into the picture, and say for example, here we have the leaf. Okay. And again, here is the soil surface and here we have the root. From diffusion, water is now present in the plant body. Okay. And this water is present over here, but it needs the motivation to go to that top height. Okay. So, that motivation is created by the stomatal pores which are present on leaves, sometimes on stems or on different parts as well. So, now these pores, what they will do is, they will start losing the water. Okay, that is already present in the plant body. So, this part is acquiring the water, but this part is releasing the water to the surrounding. Now, what happens is, over here in this cell of the plant, the water concentration has again depleted. Now, it needs to again fulfill that water concentration. So, what will it do? It will take up the water from the neighboring cells. Okay. Now, this has become deficient. So, this will take water from the another nearby cell. Okay. Then again, the situation repeats. This has become depleted. It will take from another one. This has become depleted. It will take from another one. As you can see, we have formed a system through which the water which is present over here now can reach over here. Okay. So, this mechanism is called as transpiration pull. This process of losing the water through the stomata is referred to as transpiration. And because of this transpiration, the water is being pulled from the bottom part to the top part. Okay. Now, writing all the things that we have discussed using the image into an answer. What you will write? So, you will be writing that the water that is lost through the stomata is replaced by the water from the xylem vessels in the leaf. Okay, that we just saw in the simple diagram. Okay. Then the evaporation of water molecules from the cells of a leaf creates a suction that pulls water from the xylem cells of roots. Simply what we have just seen, we are putting it into a sentence. Okay. So, there is a suction that is present. So, there is a suction that is being created which will be pulling the water to the plant parts which are at higher heights. Okay. The laws of water. Now, here we will be defining what is transpiration. The loss of water in the form of vapor from the aerial parts of the plant is known as transpiration. So, first of all, we had the creation of concentration gradient in the root cells, for which the plant actively pumped the ions, okay, created high concentration of ions and low concentration of water, okay, in the root cells. Then water eventually traveled into the roots, and then the water was belonging to the plant. But this process is not sufficient to reach higher heights, hence we had the transpirational pull. Okay. So, now that we have learnt about transpiration, let us see what is the significance of this transpiration thing. Okay. Because that might also become a question in your examination. So, here we have the significance of transpiration coming up for you. Transpiration helps in the absorption and upward movement of water and minerals dissolved in it from roots to the leaves. Okay, as we have just seen in the diagram, obviously because of that transpiration only, water was being pulled up to the higher plant parts. Hence, this transpiration helps in the absorption and upward movement of water and minerals dissolved in it from the roots to the leaves. The next thing is, it also helps in temperature regulation. So, if there is very much heat, what we human beings do? We also start sweating, right? We start to release water molecules from our surfaces, from our body surfaces. So, similar thing for plants as well. If they are in very heated condition, they will start losing the water molecules and they will start to cool their own plant body. Okay. Hence, it also helps in temperature regulation. The question here is, write a note on excretion in plants. Now, we human beings have an excretory system for our excretory purposes. First of all, where is this excretory products forming and why is this forming? Due to the metabolism that is undergoing, we are breaking down the glucose, we are using some food materials. So, there are always metabolic waste that is being produced in our body, and this is being produced into the blood, and hence filtration of blood is carried out by kidney. Okay, and all these waste products will leave our body in the form of urine. Similarly, excretion also occur in plant parts. But there is not a specific system present, like we just saw about human excretory system, there were some cells and all. These things are not present in plants, but yeah, they do undergo the excretion process. Let us see how. So over here, first thing is, when the plant is performing the process of photosynthesis. Photosynthesis means making or producing the food using the chemical energy coming from the sunlight, and it will use some other things like water, nutrients and all, and then it will create the food in the form of glucose. Okay, and it will save or store it in the form of starch. Okay, so during the process of photosynthesis, oxygen is also released. Hence, we have indoor plants. We always promote that there should be more trees in our environment and we should not cut down the trees. Why? Because they are giving us the oxygen. Okay, but it is a byproduct of the plant. It does not intend to produce it. It is just producing it. Okay, so we can say that it is also in a kind excretory product of the plant. Okay, hence we have mentioned it over here. Next point is, excess water is lost to the transpiration. We just saw that as well. Stomata were the pores which were releasing the water into the atmosphere. So that is also being released out of the plant body. So that can also be considered as an excretory product. Next is, many plant waste products are stored in cellular vacuoles. Plant cells, a very distinguishing character is that they have huge vacuoles. In animals, vacuoles are none, or even if they are present, they are very small in structure. So if I say this is a plant cell, okay, then a major part is of vacuole only, right? This is a distinguishing point between plant and animal cells. So what will plants do is that there is a huge space which is present, right? So they will store their waste materials inside this vacuole. Okay, so this is a mechanism. Many plant waste products are stored in cellular vacuoles, and as you have already seen, there are wilting of leaves going on. The leaves become dead, then they are being fallen off, right? So eventually, say for example, this is a leaf cell. There are many leaf cells like this, and there are vacuoles which are being filled up with the waste products time to time. When the plants will have very much amount of waste products present in a cell, they will eventually take up the nutrients from those cells and surrounding cells, and the leaf will then fall off. So basically, they have just got rid of the waste products that were stored in their body. Okay. Next point is saying that only waste products may be stored in leaves that fall off. Okay. Other waste products are stored as resins and gums, especially in old xylem. So you might have heard about resins and gums. These are of economical importance for us human beings, but for plants they are waste products and they are being stored in structures such as old xylem. Old xylem was young, it was involved in water transport, but the cells have degraded, the cells have aged, now it has become old xylem. Okay. As the name suggests, it was very simple. Next is, plants also excrete some waste substances into the soil that is around them. Okay. So that was all about excretion which is happening in plants. We have included this question because you had questions from this topic in your previous year papers. But this excretion in plants was not seen or was very less frequent. Hence, it can make its way to your upcoming examination. The question here is a long answer type question. Okay, it gives you 5 marks. You are being asked questions from this chapter for 4 marks and for 5 marks, which will have smaller questions compiled together. Okay, so don't panic. You just need to take it as separate or single questions and answer it, and you will be good to go. So the first question is, draw a label diagram of the human respiratory system. Okay, this question in different way, but they were only asking about the diagram of your lungs and your respiratory tract, has come in your previous year papers. Hence, you should not anyways miss out on the diagrams which are present in biology topics, like your excretory system, nephrons, we have human respiratory system, then you have the human heart. All of these diagrams will always enhance your understanding and your capacity to gain marks in that answer. Okay, even if you are not being asked about the diagram, if you are writing a note about the circulatory system, just add simple diagram of heart. It will only give you the benefit, okay? Because when a teacher checks, if he sees the diagram, it shows that you have some understanding, okay? And you will also get some points to remember when you are labeling that diagram, okay? So first is to draw a label diagram of human respiratory system. Then we have explain how gas exchange take place in lower and higher organisms. Or you are given with options. Mostly when you are having long answer questions, you will be having options in them. Okay, so we have included some options. Next is draw a label diagram of the human heart and why do mammals need a 4-chambered heart. Okay. So let us have the diagram for the human respiratory system first. We will be answering this part. Here we have the diagram for human respiratory system. You can see I will highlight the major parts that you could not delete from your diagram and from your labels when you are doing it in the exam. This is the trachea part. This is windpipe. When you are inhaling from your nose and all of those things, trachea is the tube that is receiving that air. So, trachea or windpipe becomes of utmost importance. You will start it from over here only. So, you might as well start your diagram with nose. Then we have this lungs. Okay, lungs are very much important for your respiration. So, you need to draw it. Then, in your lungs, what is important is, there is this, bronchioles. First of all, we have bronchus. Now, this bronchus will be diverging into small bronchioles. Okay, as the name suggests, bronchus is the big one, bronchioles is the smaller one. Now, over here you have alveoli. This is the air sacs that is present. And over here only, oxygen-rich air is coming. Here there will be blood, okay, capillaries will be present. So, a very close contact is made between alveoli and the blood vessels that are present near it. Now, the blood will give out the CO2, that is carbon dioxide, to the alveoli, and alveoli will be giving out the oxygen. Remember, hemoglobin is present in the blood, so it will again quickly bind to the oxygen, and blood already has carbon dioxide which will diffuse out of the blood system and it will enter the lungs. So, when you exhale, again this system will give out the carbon dioxide rich air to the atmosphere. Okay. So, not going into the physiology, we just had a touch because we were at the topic. You need to draw this alveoli and you also should mention this pulmonary venule and pulmonary arteriole. Okay. Again, arteries is the big structure, arteriole is the smaller structure. Same goes with the venule. Okay. So, this is the respiratory system diagram which you need to draw, and don't forget this diaphragm. Because of this diaphragm only, we are able to inhale and exhale. When we inhale, this diaphragm will be flattened, okay, so that the lungs will occupy more space, and now the air is occupied with the larger volume. And when we exhale, this flattened diaphragm will become dome shaped, okay, like this. So, the space provided to lungs is now decreased. So, the lungs will push out the air outside, okay, and hence we are able to exhale. So, here friends, we have also understand the mechanism of your breathing and how you respire. You need to understand that as well, because that can also become a question. We never know, okay. So, we should always touch the related topics when we are doing a question. The next question is, explain how gas exchange takes place in lower and higher organisms. A related question came in your previous year papers, which was asking you about how do organisms in land and organisms in water differ in their respiration mechanism. So obviously aquatic organisms have dissolved oxygen access, so they have different organs like they have gills, and we have abundant of oxygen in our atmosphere, so we are using the lungs. Okay, this is what was asked in your paper. So now this kind of question could be asked, hence we should know the detail. Now over here, in lower and simpler organisms, what is happening is they are simple structures. They don't have many cells, they don't have many complex structures. Say for example, there is only one cell. Okay, and just as we talked about that root cells, ions was being pumped and water was being taken up. Over here, if this is a simple cell, oxygen concentration inside the cell decreases. Oxygen, which is rich in the surrounding air, enters into the cell. Okay, as simple as that. That's why we are calling them as simple organisms. Over here, gas exchange takes place by diffusion. The oxygen from a region of higher concentration travelled to a region of lower concentration. Thus, diffusion occurred. Okay. So, all the minute organisms like amoeba and paramecium have no specialized organ for breathing. So, the gases are diffused by the cell membrane. Cell membrane, this structure, right, which is distinguishing the organism from its surrounding, right. Next one is about the higher organism. In higher organism, obviously we have just talked, we have respiratory pigments, we have respiratory system. So, while talking about respiration in higher organisms, the respiratory system comes into picture, then we have respiratory pigment. Say for example, we have just dealt with hemoglobin, right. That is a respiratory pigment which will take up the oxygen from air in the lungs and carry it to the tissues that are deficient in oxygen before releasing it. Okay. Next, some more information about this thing is that in human beings, the respiratory pigment is hemoglobin, which is present in RBCs, which have a higher affinity for oxygen. Now, there is a trick, students. This hemoglobin is actually having much more affinity for carbon dioxide than for oxygen. So, there could be a time wherein this hemoglobin is starting to bind the CO2 molecules. Then what will happen? Yes, your tissues, your body will starve of oxygen. Hence, carbon dioxide is mostly transported not by the RBCs. RBC's job is to transport the oxygen. So, what do we do about this carbon dioxide? It is also produced in our body and it needs to get out of our body, right? So, carbon dioxide is more soluble in water than oxygen. That is a good thing again. Okay. So, in our plasma which is present in blood, this carbon dioxide is soluble and hence is mostly transported in the dissolved form in our blood. It need not be bound to the hemoglobin for the transport. It can only dissolve in the blood itself. Okay. So, that is a good part. So, we have completed this part of the question. Okay. First part was to just draw the diagram and second part, as you see, is also very simple. What you will be studying for other things is being extrapolated over here. Okay. So, I believe we can answer such type of questions if we distinguish it and we separate it out and we don't panic. Okay. Now, let's go for second question. It says us to draw a label diagram of human heart. So, over here, let us have the human heart, just as we had the human respiratory system. Over here, this diagram is of a muscular pump. As you can see, there are muscles present. So, it is a pumping organ which will pump the blood to the rest of your body. Over here, we have right atrium, right ventricle, left atrium. All of these things are important when you are drawing the diagram. Then we have pulmonary artery, pulmonary vein. These valves are also important. Okay, even if you can mention two, or you at least should mention two valves when you are drawing the diagram of heart. Okay, and if you are not remembering the names of other valves, just write valve at least. Okay, not for a good scenario. I am just saying if you are forgotten what you need to write. Okay, over here, mitral valve is a name which you can remember. tricuspid because there are 3 cusps are there, hence the name is tricuspid. Then we have pulmonary valve. Okay, these are the terms which you can remember. And here is the aorta. This is the major thing in our heart. So aortic valve is also not a big deal that you will forget in your exam. Okay. Then we have the vena cava, superior one and the inferior one. And last but not the least, we have the enclosed structure in pericardium. Okay. So all of these labels are very much important when you are drawing the human heart diagram. And if you are comfortable with drawing these arrows, you might as well. But I suggest you to not draw these arrows if you are not very sure. Okay. And if you are very sure with the mechanism of how heart works and all of those things, from where the blood is going where, then you can easily draw these arrows. That is not a big issue. Okay. So we have completed the label diagram of the human heart. You must also know how the blood is transporting and how we are gaining the oxygen. Next question is, why do mammals need a 4-chambered heart? You do know that we mammals have a 4-chambered heart. That means there are 4 chambers. Right atrium, left atrium, right ventricle, left ventricle. Other organisms might not have that. Like fishes, they have 3-chambered heart. Or other organisms, they also have 2-chambered heart. Okay. So what is the need for this 4-chambered heart, such complex heart for human beings or for mammals? Basically friends, when we are talking about a 4-chambered heart, there is proper segregation which is done. Okay. And this proper segregation, say just take an analogy that your table, your work table or your study table is properly segregated. Your note section is somewhere, your charts are somewhere, then you have formulas then you have formulae which is written somewhere else, and your stationary things are somewhere else. Now when you will sit to study, you can easily pick them up. Okay, there will be no clutter, your mind will be very clear and you can do your work efficiently. That is the purpose of having a 4-chambered heart. There are proper segregations, proper functions and events are undergone in each of those, and hence the function, that is to pump the blood and to gain oxygen, becomes very efficient when we are having a 4-chambered heart. So let us see over here. The separation of the right side and the left side of the heart keeps the oxygenated blood and deoxygenated blood from mixing. Obviously, we have superior vena cava and inferior vena cava. What are they doing? They are bringing the deoxygenated blood, impure blood, okay, from the rest of the body towards the heart, right? So, heart is also having the pulmonary artery and pulmonary veins, from where it will be having access to the oxygenated blood. Now, what if this deoxygenated blood and this oxygenated blood are mixed together? Then the whole purpose was just meaningless. Hence, this separation is very much important to keep oxygenated and deoxygenated blood from mixing with each other. Okay. Next point is, such separation allows a highly efficient supply of oxygen to the body. Okay. So, the oxygen in the body can easily transport to the various tissues. Because of this separation, heart will easily take the deoxygenated blood and it will send it to the lungs, and it will take the oxygenated blood that came from the lungs to the whole body. Okay. So, this process is being easier because of the segregation which was possible because of the 4-chambered heart. Okay. Next thing is birds and mammals. Why only we and birds require this kind of 4-chambered heart is that we are warm-blooded animals. That means we are continuously regulating our temperature against the environment's temperature. Okay. Cold-blooded organisms will just fluctuate their body temperature as per the environment. So, if the environment is becoming hot, their body will also become hot. If the environment is being cold, their body will also become cold. But we are maintaining our body temperature to 37 degrees Celsius. Okay, more or less this is the value. And this is irrespective of the atmosphere. In summers or in winters, our body temperature will be almost 37 degrees Celsius. For this, we need to spend a lot of energy. And why is this temperature maintenance important? Because there are many metabolic reactions undergoing in our body which require a specific temperature, which are in simple terms temperature sensitive. Okay. Hence, we are spending a lot of energy on our temperature maintenance. Okay. Hence, we have written that birds and mammals have higher energy needs as they constantly use energy to maintain their body temperature. Hence, a 4-chambered heart is required. Okay. So, such question can also make their way to your examination. Hence, you need to pay attention. So, friends, in this session, we have discussed many questions and we have discussed the related topics from which that question has come. We have also tried to cover maximum amount of information that could be related to that question. All these things will be helpful for you when you are doing the last minute revision. So, you can use these videos on 2x speed or 1.5x speed and you can just go through the chapter at a glance. Okay. I hope this discussion is helpful for you and all the best for your upcoming examinations.